Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 96 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today I have a very interesting interview with Karen Schuder. Karen is a graduate student and doctoral candidate who has been looking into business ethics education. I visit with Karen about some of the work she's done on her dissertation. It includes her research work, her theoretical underpinnings, and some of her findings. I hope you will find this episode interesting. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox, and I would like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today I have with me Karen Schuder. Karen is a doctoral candidate and graduate student who has done starting some very interesting research. She has talked to a wide variety of folks, and I asked her if she could talk about some of the things she's looking at, the data sources she's using, and theoretical frameworks for some business ethics education and implications for people like myself in anti-corruption compliance programs going forward. So she very graciously agreed to take some time out of her very busy schedule and come on to the podcast. So Karen, with that, welcome and thank you very much.
Hey, Tom, you're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity.
Karen, could you tell our listeners a little bit about the graduate degree that you're seeking? And I'm the son of a professor, so I fully understand the dissertation process, but maybe a little bit about the process you're going through.
Yeah, I am in an educational doctorate program that's an EDD. It's a program focused on leadership at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's been a 4.5-year process for me, and I have prior to that a Master's of Divinity and a Master's in the Arts of Management, and I was geared in this process to focus on business ethics education. And so the process started with doing a literature view. That means just looking at all of the literature focused on business ethics education and gathering in that data. And then after that, what I'm done is a qualitative research study, and my research data sources outside of the literature review has been long interviews with 29 business leaders in a whole variety of industries. All of them are located in the U.S. and leading mid to very large corporate businesses. So it's been a very interesting process and very intriguing as far as getting some insight from these very experienced business leaders. Most of them have had more than 20 years of experience in business.
Karen, one of the things that intrigued me about your project, your research and dissertation, is the intersection of compliance and ethics. I talk about compliance all the time, all day, every day. But I rarely say I talk about compliance and ethics. And you're really focusing on ethics, though. What kind of led you to that initial inquiry?
My husband and I own a small business. It's a practice, and I am an ordained clergy, and I've served as a pastor in churches. I've worked with a whole wide variety of people, but I have not been immersed in the corporate environment. And while I was working on a master's in the arts of management, looking at organizational development focus and systems theory, I was introduced to business ethics. Now, as a layperson, I really didn't even think that field existed. And so that introduction to the realm and even the possibility of business ethics was very exciting to me. Of course, from my lay perspective, it's tainted or it's shaped by what we see on the media. And so from my perspective, it seems, from what the media presents, it seems oftentimes that what corporations think of as ethical is simply complying to legislation, whereas this field of ethics is saying, no, it can be so much more than simply being compliant.
Karen, I was just at a conference of an organization called the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. And as you might guess from the title, compliance is a large portion of the group and the topics at the conference. But in view of some of the things that have recently come out, even from professional football, ethics seem to be elevated in the discussion. And many people were wondering, I guess to kind of flip what you just said, maybe compliance is more than just complying with the law. Maybe there needs to be that discussion. So I was really gratified to find your work in this area. I was wondering if you, in your process, did you group your data into any categories that you could share with us?
Yeah, I did. And I just want to preface that by saying it was an amazing experience talking with the 29 business leaders. And these were all folks that expressed the importance of ethics and as a part of that, a strong sense of corporate social responsibility and that business and their participation in business is far beyond just a financial reward or a financial profit. So, and the different categories that and again, looking at the data of the 29 interviews, it's a process of coding the information, the words, the statements, the concepts that people talk about in response to the questions surrounding business ethics education. And in that process, I have narrowed my data down to 4 different categories. One is being teaching and promoting of business ethics. And then the second is understanding business ethics. So looking at the different dimensions of ethics, understanding what ethics means or what it looks like in the business world, also looking at the moral foundation of individuals, and then the role that ethics plays in an individual's career. The third category is dealing with power and pressures. That was a big conversation piece when people talked about the moral dilemmas that they had to face, and what they had to deal with in order to remain ethical, to make ethical decisions in those challenges. And the power and pressures that were often talked about included leadership, organizational culture, and then outside forces, which includes anything from societal pressures or legislation or specific industry pressures. And then the fourth category of data is looking at pursuing professionalism. So that involves different strategies of growing professionally, also includes beliefs and values of the individual and how they bring that into the work, and then also working perspectives and kind of what I touched on earlier, having, for example, a perspective that work is more than making money.
Within the context of what you're doing for your PhD dissertation, did you have any theoretical frameworks that you either developed or you tried to utilize in all or part of your analysis?
Yeah, my qualitative research is grounded theory. So what that means is having the research and then using established theories to try to come up with my own theory, which I have yet to finalize and formalize. But I have used 4 theoretical frameworks for analyzing the data that I've gathered in these interviews. The first theory is Lawrence Kohlberg's theory on moral development, and I use that one because that has been a standard theory in use regarding research that has been done on business ethics education, and it's a classic theory on understanding moral development of individuals. And the one appealing thing about Lawrence Kohlberg's theory is that it is open to continued moral development of individuals throughout their lifespan. The second theory is John Dewey's educational and moral theories. John Dewey's theories were very significant in shaping our educational systems in the U.S. And also he had a very strong component regarding moral education and also educational institutions' societal responsibilities. The third theory that I used is Edgar Schein's theory on organizational culture, and use that because that I like the practicality of that theory, but also because organizational culture was such a prominent data piece in the interviews that seemed a good theory to use. And then the fourth theory is Bowman and Deal's theory on reframing organizations. That theory was helpful in doing a secondary analysis, looking at the data because of the four perspectives that it gives to look at that data with.
Karen, if I could go back to your thoughts on Edgar Schein's theory on organizational culture. One of the things that I think individuals and companies struggle with is how do you not only reach that individual, but how does an overall corporate entity or an organizational culture, if I could use those theoretical terms, have an ethical value? How did that theory play into your work?
Okay, that's a good question. In my data, it was almost everyone that I talked about the prominent role of very top leadership in shaping the ethical culture of a company. And Edgar Schein's theory recognizes the influence and the power of leadership on organizations. Now, he also contends that it's this revolving circle where a culture chooses also the leaders. But there's definitely a role that the top leaders play in implanting the beliefs, the values, and the goals within a company. So that I think that recognition is really important in the power of leadership, but also that it's significant theory because it talks about the different techniques for embedding culture, and of course those include hiring, firing, but also what is rewarded, what is noticed by top leadership, what is communicated by top leadership. And one of the things I found for these companies, these individuals that represent companies that feel ethics is important, top leadership, ethics education, which is required to a certain degree and because of legislation, but is also an excellent tool for embedding ethical business behaviors in a culture. So ethics education can be seen as a tool for embedding important values and beliefs.
John Dewey is certainly a name that's familiar to me. Many listeners may recognize Dewey's educational theories, we may have heard in undergraduate or graduate studies. So I was very interested to see that you had used, or at least referenced, Dewey in your overall conceptual framework. But I'd like to focus on one of the phrases that I think comes from Dewey, which is social soil, where individuals come from. Does that mean the sort of social milieu that we grew up in, you in Minnesota, me in Texas, or does social soil refer to a corporate environment, or perhaps both? Yeah,
exactly. It refers to the context, the social context that an individual is. Dewey believed that there is not a standard set of principles that are the be-all, end-all in guiding us for dealing with moral dilemmas, but that there is always a social contextual factor in how we react to different moral dilemmas and how we respond to them, how we process them. So he really believed that the social aspects of a person's life, of their environment that they're having to operate in, whether that's work or personal or in any, shape and form, is affected by the social relationships that are impacted by decisions and dilemmas.
Now if I could turn to Kohlberg's theory on moral development. And really the question I would have for you under that theory is, I certainly understand that individuals can have moral growth and moral development, but do you find that theory would also be applicable to business organizations?
It is to some extent. There's definite limitations to that theory. I think there's, one of the interesting things in my work is I had a really hard time finding a current moral development theory that I thought was very, was really adequate and substantial. The one thing that's really relevant about Lawrence Kohlberg's theory is that, he believed that there's 6 stages of development and that most adults really only operate at stages 3 and 4, which means there's great potential for growth for all of us, really. The other significant piece of Lawrence Kohlberg's theory on moral development is that the way that we can grow morally is when our assumptions, when the things that are so established, our established beliefs and value systems are rattled or shaken up. So it makes us think about different perspectives or different beliefs and different values and the validity that those might have in our lives. So it's that kind of dissonance or that being shaken up in a way that really, and then conversing about it, talking about it with other people, talking about moral dilemmas, talking about ethics issues, and that is really the way that we can grow morally.
Now if we could turn to the fourth theory that you referenced, Bowman and Deal's theory on reframing organizations. I work typically with organizations, and I think most people in the business world do, so that's probably where most of the questions from people like myself or interest from people like myself would come from, and sort of focusing on the first 2 points you listed, structural and human resources. It seems to me that theory really is a very large part of what you are trying to communicate. Is that correct, or did I misread what you said earlier?
Can you ask that again, Tom?
Sure. On their first 2 points of Bowman and Deal's theory on reframing organizations, which they talk about structural and human resource.
Yep.
Those seem to be some of the key points that a business would want to look at. How do you structure or put in structural techniques to help move the ethics ball forward, if I can use that phrase?
Yeah.
And then the human resource, since organizations, of course, exist for people, how can you use that human dimension inside of a corporation to move the ball forward on ethics? It seems like to me that's 2 of the things that you have talked about, and I just wondered, did I miss the boat on that, or is that really a large part of what you've explored? Yeah,
the great thing about Bowman and Deal's theory is and there's other theories out there similar to it as well, but it offers 4 different ways of looking at an organization and how an organization functions. And the cool thing is it's a reminder that if a lot of times we look at an organization in one particular way, and in business it's oftentimes a structural lens, right? It's looking at a focus on efficiency, and the part of that is goals and the appropriate division of labor. And so that's, and it's trying for the increasing of efficiency and effectiveness. But what their theory brings out is that we can benefit because each lens is only partial. We can benefit by looking at an organization through different lenses. And so if you look at an organization that has a structural focus on it, but you look at it through the human resource lens, it can give you a whole different understanding of what that organization involves and what it needs. to grow or to change. And the other two lenses are the political lens, which focuses on the power and political arenas within a group. A part of that is looking at the scarcity of resources and how those resources are used. The fourth lens is symbolic. It focuses on values, on beliefs, on faith, on rituals that people use to understand the world. The great validity or power in using that symbolic lens is that in our secular society, we like to think we are so secular. But the reality is we are all shaped by the beliefs and values that we've grown up and that we've, had in our minds, our hearts, and that is a big part of how we make decisions. And so by being able to use those four lenses, the structural, human resource, political, and symbolic, I used it to look at the data that people gave me in understanding how to deal with moral dilemmas and make ethical decisions. And that theory is oftentimes used for looking at organizations and helping to understand organizations in different ways.
Well, Karen, we're nearly at the end of our time, so I wanted to conclude by circling back to when you listed, when we started off, you started talking about four of the data categories that you had utilized. And I was very gratified when you listed as the first one, I don't know if it was an intentional or not, but teaching and promoting business ethics. And the reason I was gratified is that's something that I think really needs exploration in the corporate world. I think maybe in the business school world it's done a little bit more, but in the corporate world there is the need for that reminder or that moment to think about it, or teaching, whatever the term might be. So I was very gratified when you listed that first, whether that was intentional or not. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you further, hopefully, when you conclude your research and get your dissertation published, to see what conclusions you may have for us and how we can maybe use that going forward. So any final thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Tom, for the opportunity. And my final thought is one of the clear messages that really came out from these business leaders is the message that ethical business is good business. It's sustainable, and it's a working theory that most people find to be very nourishing and also help them be the best at what they can do.
That's